Hello, this is Killican, and while it's still summer and way out of season, let's do what we used to do back in the early 2000s and enjoy us some Japanese horror. And by that I of course mean the only really good horror to come out of Japan, Silent Hill. Now, I've already done multiple videos on my favorite survival horror franchise, but being in the midst of a replay, I'd say it's time to take a closer look at Silent Hill Homecoming. Spoiler alert, it's impossible to talk about most of these games without spoiling something, so if you haven't played it yet, and I suggest you do, this is your last warning. Spoiler alert. You have been warned. Now, I actually never hated this game as much as the fandom did. Certainly not as much as Japan did, because for some reason they didn't even release it there. But I was still in the Navy when it first came out, and I was intrigued. Although I was never deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan, I knew people who had been, and I had seen firsthand how the experiences over there can mess you up epically. But, put it this way. While on watch one night, I stumbled upon a sailor trying to send herself the way of Heath Ledger. Alright, yep, so yeah, picture that. So, naturally, when I heard Silent Hill was saddling up with our troops, regardless of how anyone feels about the wars themselves, and maybe even send a message about the mental health of servicemen, I was ready to charge back into that foggy New England town and give Pyramid Head to the count of 10 to get his ugly, yellow, no good keister out of my way before I pumped his guts full of lead. Of course, I knew it wasn't going to be a straight up shooter, although the way they changed up the control scheme, you'd think they had. And of course, it would have been nice if they gave you, ammo for the weapons. But then resource management has always been key to survival horror, so I can't really blame him for that. And even in my most recent playthrough, I find that most enemies and even most bosses can be handled with the initial melee weapon, the combat knife. It's actually kind of OP once you figure out how to use it. But even if you wisely conserve your ammo for the bigger baddies, some, such as the Lurker, are also pretty easy to run away from, and since stopping to fight them can sometimes attract other enemies, yeah, it's best to just evade. Also, I'd recommend doing the cemetery puzzle to get the assault rifle. Makes handling the bigger monsters child's play. But enough about all that. Let's get to the meat of the franchise, what always is the story. Now, I had heard lots of gripes about it, but I don't really have any complaints myself, although it should be noted that Alex's love interest Elle was originally supposed to be an adult version of Laura from Silent Hill 2. It would have been nice to have more than just a passing cameo from my boy Travis from Origins, my favorite character in the franchise. And it kind of sucks that one line of dialogue by Deputy Wheeler proclaims Sybil Bennett's tragic fate on the merry-go-round in the good minus ending of Silent Hill 1 to be canon. And I know I've done a video about this in the past, but in case y'all haven't seen it, I have zero problem with a variant of Pyramid Head showing up to torment slash punish Alex and his dad, Adam. I mean, if you look closely at it, you'll see it is not the same Pyramid Head from 2. It's the same monster, but tailored to Alex and Adam. The same can be said about the boogeyman variant we see in Downpour, who has neither the pyramid nor the giant blade, instead wearing a gas mask and swinging a sledgehammer. I mean, the Executioner, aka Pyramid Head, aka the Boogeyman, exists to drive people into despair and ultimately suicide, which makes sense, I mean, considering that suicide is supposed to be the worst sin of all, and the malevolent spirit responsible for the cult and spiritual torments of Silent Hill was positively identified as the devil himself in the first game. Yeah, I can hear it all now, fellow nerds. Go ahead, prattle on about how it's really just a spiritual pool for people's psyches to take shape, but such a thing would be an ideal tool for a malignant spirit, a spiritual entity, monster calling itself by the name it went by before it turned to evil, isn't it? I mean, seriously, look up the theology and all. Sam Aile was the Anakin Skywalker to Lucifer's Darth Vader. Come on. But anyway, getting back to it, as for Alex Shepard himself, again, no real complaint, especially since he's voiced by the guy who's the latest VJ from the Wolfenstein series. He puts up a convincing front as a disgruntled veteran with a troubled childhood. Although, of course, anyone who served in the military like I have would know that wearing your camouflage jacket and dog tags with civilian clothing is out of regulations and generally frowned upon. Which might have been a hint that Alex hadn't spent the past several years where he had said he'd been. All that aside, I was still pretty surprised by the Shutter Island style reveal that Alex had never joined the army. He was wearing his own father's dog tags and had been committed to a nut house after going mental on account of accidentally killing his little brother Josh. Looking back on it, it was fairly obvious the kid had croaked. I mean, since it had been years since he last saw the boy and his evasive apparitions he's chasing all through the game hadn't aged a day. Plus, the kids revealed early on to have had a fixation on spiders and all the spider-like and insect-like monsters that attack throughout the game. It should have been pretty obvious that the big boss at the end would be Josh's tormented soul. Also, I didn't mind them bringing the Order back into play. I mean, sure, they stole a little of the movie's juice there, putting them in gas masks and making them militant zealots and all. But it made sense to give the soldier wannabe an enemy army to fight, not just monsters. Alex even exchanges gunfire with them in the titular town. It also made sense that after so much interference with their plans, i.e., Harry and Heather, the Order would move to exploit their neighbors in Shepherd's Glen, who were allowed to leave the Order only so long as one child of the founding families be sacrificed with each generation. But of course, Alex unwittingly threw a monkey wrench into all that by killing Josh by accident when Alex was the one sworn to be sacrificed. I mean, thinking it all the way through, I'd say I wouldn't call Homecoming the best entry in the entire franchise, but definitely far from the worst. I mean, functionally speaking, I'd say it's technically a better overall game than Origins, which is my favorite. And as much as I'll admit Shattered Memories wasn't bad at all, I can't forgive the removal of combat as even an option. Yeah, and I certainly can't abide it being made a Diablo clone on the PS Vita. Homecoming, it may not be perfect, I mean, with a frame rate that freaks out half the time you fire a gun, less ammo than you'd expect for a game that really wants to be shooty, and graphics that show their age, but with the eerie atmosphere, twisted monstrosities, occasional puzzle, and a mind-bending story, it feels way more traditional survival horror than any number of run-and-hide jump-scare roller coasters a la Outcast and Amnesia. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like and share. Don't forget to subscribe, and peace out.